Hello, YouTube. All right, so Melissa Click, she's in the news again. She wrote an article, which is basically like a damage control piece. You know it's a damage control piece because it's on the heels of the announcement of her termination from the University of Missouri, and she's the author of the article. And she looks quite good in the photo. We're not used to seeing her like that. We're used to seeing her more like this, like some kind of like authoritarian bully denying some student journalists his First Amendment rights, and we're used to seeing her kind of more in a social justice kind of activist role, arguing against the cops. And this photo, this is my favorite photo. I actually laughed out loud when I saw it. Because look, that's Jonathan Butler standing right behind her, and they both got their mouths gaping open. It's like this kind of funny action shot. But yeah, Jonathan Butler, the activist, son of a multimillionaire. And yeah, she looks quite nice to the way we're used to seeing her. And she even provided the photo. So yeah, this is a total damage control piece. So this video is basically like a reply and kind of a rant against what she wrote in the article. Because I gotta admit, when I read it, it kind of ticked me off a little bit. It was just, we'll get into it. But somehow she found this new concern, not just for students of color, but for free speech and due process. What do you know? So let's get into it. I think most people remember who Melissa Click was, and they remember the events that took place that thrust her into the public spotlight. But here's just a brief reminder of what happened.
Hi, media. Can I talk to you?
No, you need to get out.
Well,
you need to get out.
No, I don't.
You need to get out.
I actually don't.
All right. Hey, who wants to help me get this reporter out of here? I need some muscle over here.
So the article she wrote that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, she wrote this month, March 17th. But about a month prior, she was out doing some TV interviews where she was basically saying she was sorry and regrets some of the actions she took. So before I get into her most recent article, let's take a look at some of these TV interviews that she did.
Were you appalled by your behavior when you watched the video?
I was embarrassed by my behavior. I believe it doesn't represent who I am as a person. It doesn't represent the good I was doing there that day. And certainly I wish I could do it over again.
Click says she was trying to protect the students protesting, who she says were under threat, and wasn't sure the man filming was a real journalist.
He introduced himself only as media and came at me with a camera.
That's a camera, not a weapon.
Good on that reporter for calling her out on that. I like to describe these social justice types as narrative pushers. When they tell their story, it's going to be spun in a certain way that's going to maintain that narrative. They're going to do it either in a very overt way or a subtle way. Melissa Click was doing something a little subtle there. When you say someone came at you with something, that's usually the language you use to describe a person who's attacking you, and you're describing the implement that we're going to use as a weapon. Come on, Melissa Click, give me a break.
Sure. But it also wasn't a big camera. It could have been a phone-sized camera. It wasn't didn't say professional journalist to me.
Look, it doesn't matter what the size of the guy's camera was. You were in no position to lay claim to a portion of the campus and essentially start functioning as the gatekeeper.
I need some muscle over here. Help me get him out.
Is calling for muscle out here respectful?
It was a mistake. I never, ever meant that as a call for violence. It was just one of those things that was said in a heated moment.
I think we can give her some credit for that apology, and I think it should be accepted. But at the same time, I don't think she should be left off the hook. While I believe her when she says that she didn't intend for any physical violence to be inflicted upon that student, I don't see any other way of interpreting those events other than that she intended for physical force or intimidation to be used to remove that student from where he was. And I think intimidation is what got the guy out of there. But neither way is acceptable. And if she loses her job over it, that would not be inappropriate.
But another video released last week by the Columbia Missourian newspaper shows Click at an earlier protest during homecoming in October, cursing at a police officer who she says pushed her. You can understand where a lot of people watching those videos are saying, she's got a problem.
People who know me don't feel that way. People who were there that day don't feel that way. They know what it was like to be there. They know I was there with the best of intentions, and they know it was a really tricky situation.
All right, Melissa Click, I'm just saying, of course, everyone in your safe space or your ideological echo chamber is going to agree with you. You don't get exonerated from wrongdoing by pointing out that other like-minded social justice types see eye to eye with you. So this next interview clip, Melissa Click is going to be talking specifically about the events that took place at the homecoming parade.
There had been several other videos of the president's car getting stopped, but these two new videos from the body cameras of Columbia police officers, that is new. Characterize yourself in the video that we aired last night.
Sure. Well, I would say first, I was present at the homecoming parade, like everyone else, to enjoy homecoming. And I was really moved by the students' message. I just happened to be standing near where they were. And I was so moved, especially in the context of the crowd being angry, that I decided to stand with them. It was something I didn't have a lot of time to think about, and I jumped into it. As I've said many times, this isn't something I normally do. So I jumped in to stand with the students. I was moved by their tears as they stood in front of the president's car. I was moved by colleagues that came and stood by me. And I think the video shows that I was very concerned about the students' safety and that I was willing to put myself in between the police and the students to keep MU students safe.
And that's it, according to Melissa Click. She's essentially like the accidental activist. She never had any intention of getting involved with this stuff. She just happened to witness this protest at the homecoming day parade. I guess it touched that social justice feeling inside of her. She decided to check her privilege, become an advocate for marginalized groups, and the rest is history. And that's how her article starts off. She essentially explains that her involvement in all of this was spontaneous. But now I kind of want to take some quotes from the article and break down what she's saying. If you had any exposure to American media in the last 4 months, you know the quick decision I made to stand with the students. You've seen my inexperience with public protests, and you've heard my apologies for the mistakes I made while offering my support to the students working to make MU a more inclusive environment. Among the debates and judgments the video footage of my mistakes has attracted, few have sincerely grappled with the sudden choices I had to make in challenging circumstances, and fewer still have earnestly asked whether my protected right to speak out as a U.S. citizen requires that I must be perfect while doing so. Holy crap, it's snowing in the Sahara. Here we have a social justice warrior arguing in favor of free speech without consequence. And also, look, Melissa, no one's holding you to the standard of being perfect. They're only holding you to the standard of not calling for physical force to be used against a student journalist to have him removed from a place on campus where he has every right to be. Okay, let's get back to the article. I do not understand the widespread impulse to shame those whose best intentions unfortunately result in imperfect actions. What would our world be like if no one ever took a chance? What if everyone played it safe? In recent years, earnest mistakes made by ordinary unknown people have increasingly become national topics, their errors invoking astonishing amounts of political fury and having unanticipated impact on their careers, families, and futures. Reaction to the footage containing my errors has resulted in months of scrutiny and most recently the loss of my job. While I continue to fight the MU Board of Curators' decision to terminate my employment without due process and in violation of university policy, I am also working to come to terms with how a few captured moments of imperfection could eclipse 12 years of excellence. Alright, this part of the article kind of ticked me off a little bit, and this is how I know that Melissa Click is just completely full of shit. So let's go through a timeline of events. October 10th, that was the homecoming day parade that Melissa Click attended, and that's where she had her spontaneous decision to get involved with social justice and stand in solidarity with the concerned student activists. Now, just 10 days later, on October 20th, that same group of student activists released a list of demands which called for the resignation of the university president, Tim Wolfe, and they basically required him to publicly humiliate himself before he resigned. The list of demands. We demand that the University of Missouri System President, Tim Wolfe, writes a handwritten apology to the concerned student 1950 demonstrators and holds a press conference in the Mizzou Student Center reading the letter. In the letter and at the press conference, Tim Wolfe must acknowledge his white male privilege, recognize that systems of oppression exist, and provide a verbal commitment to fulfilling the concerned student 1950 demands. We want Tim Wolfe to admit his gross negligence, allowing his driver to hit one of the demonstrators, consenting to the physical violence of bystanders, and lastly, refusing to intervene when Columbia Police Department used excessive force with the demonstrators. And then in demand number 2, they basically just say, we demand the immediate removal of Tim Wolfe as UM system president. I kind of wonder how they expected him to fulfill the requirements that they outline in demand 1 after he's resigned. Because, at that point, doesn't he lose all his power? Like, what do they expect the guy to do? And also, their description of his gross negligence at the events that took place at the parade are just complete bullshit, just absolute propaganda. I'm not going to include any video footage here in this video, but in the low bar in the description, I'm going to have links to other videos where you could just watch them for yourself. And you've probably already seen them already. It's complete bullshit. They're just absolutely lying through their teeth. So questions for Melissa Click. Look, when you say that you don't understand the widespread impulse to shame those whose best intentions unfortunately result in imperfect actions, what the fuck are you talking about? You got involved with a group whose publicly stated goals were to do exactly that. They wanted to get this guy on a press conference and just humiliate him in front of everybody. They wanted to shame him in front of everyone. And then you want to talk about that, in recent years, mistakes that people made have unanticipated impact on their careers, families, and futures. Again, you got involved with a group. You decided to support a group who publicly stated they wanted this guy to lose his job. What the fuck are you talking about, Melissa Click? And you want to talk about your concern for due process. What concerns did you have for due process for Tim Wolfe? Or what concerns for due process did you have for the Chancellor R. Bowen Lofton? It's interesting how these social justice types get all concerned when it's their livelihood on the line. Otherwise, it's just listen and believe and don't question the lived experience of marginalized groups. And here's just a little side note. I found this website, the Forum on Graduate Rights. Basically, the concerned student activists, if you go to that website, you can find some of their meeting minutes that they had. And we'll kind of talking on the topic of shaming people, like Melissa Click is concerned about people being shamed. For some reason, these activists, they didn't want to just shame Tim Wolfe alone. For some reason, they wanted to get his wife involved in it. Maybe not necessarily publicly, but at least to her face. Check out these meeting minutes. Look at this entry that they put in there. Meet with Wolfe and his wife to discuss privilege. Fucking why? Why do you have to talk to the guy's wife? It's just kind of ridiculous. Alright, so back to the timeline. November 2nd, 2015. That's the earliest date that I found where it was announced that Jonathan Butler is going to be going on a hunger strike where he's calling for the end of Tim Wolfe's career at the University of Missouri. Now, Melissa Click, this happened before your incident where you called for a little bit of muscle over here. So you knew exactly the kind of people that you were supporting. You knew that their goal was to shame this guy, and you knew that their goal was to get him to lose his job. Okay? Now, you want to sit here and complain that you think it's not fair that you're going to lose your job over one mistake that you made. But meanwhile, you knew that the people that you were supporting were holding this guy accountable for the alleged behavior of some people driving around in a mystery pickup truck yelling racially insensitive things, or they want to hold him accountable somehow for the now infamous poop swastika. You don't want to be held accountable for the obvious mistake that you made, but you were supporting people who were holding some guy accountable for things that he didn't even do. Nowhere in your article do you offer this man right here an apology, and I think he deserves one. So, sorry to say it, but fuck you, Melissa Click, when you try to act all concerned about the shaming of people and people losing their jobs without due process. So then on November 9th, 2015, the day that you got some muscle over here, you and your activist allies all got what they wanted. You created your safe space on campus. You strong-armed a bunch of student journalists out of a place from their own campus where they had every right to be. You publicly shamed Tim Wolfe. and you successfully ended his career at the University of Missouri. And it was on that same day that the concerned student activists released a statement saying that Tim Wolfe was only the beginning. What had to happen back then for you to open up your eyes and start to question the tactics that you people were using? Apparently nothing, because you had nothing to say about it then. But now that your livelihood is on the line, all of a sudden you're concerned. All right, and we'll end off this video with a couple more quotes from her article. Whose interests are served when our drive to combat societal imperfections is defeated by fears of having our individual imperfections exposed? And what value do our rights as citizens have in a culture increasingly ruled by snap judgments and by regulations that are easily rewritten to suit changing political interests? We should all be concerned about the larger issues my situation raises. I don't want to live in a world where citizens are too afraid of public scorn to take a chance. Do you?
Freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. You can say whatever you want.
Hey, who wants to help me get this reporter out of here? I need some muscle over here.
But in turn, people are allowed to respond however they want.